Hello and welcome to the Business of Authority. I'm Jonathan Stark.
And I'm Rochelle Moulton.
And today we're going to talk about experimentation for fun and profit.
I love this. Well, Jonathan, you and I share notes in Slack, all the time. And I got this kind of odd note. What was it, like maybe 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, my time, saying, oh, by the way, I just launched this book on Amazon. and you left me a link. And then the next day I see that you announced it to your list. So, it just kind of cracked me up. It was both very Jonathan-like and very un-Jonathan-like at the same time.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So tell us, what were you thinking about? Where did this come from?
Yeah. So I know a lot of people are already aware of this because I've been getting emails with questions like, what are you doing? Kind of like what you just said. And, for people who don't know, I took one of my older books. I honestly don't know when it came out. I think I published it before the pandemic anyway. And I was like, I'm going to try something with Amazon. I'm going to do an experiment with Amazon. So I went through the books that I had already written and I was like, which one of these would be a good one to test on Amazon for me to get more familiar with how it works and the process of just getting a book up there, the process of going through print on demand, because I don't have any self-published books that are available in print, which drives some people crazy. So there was a whole bunch of things that had led up to me saying like, okay, now is finally the time to put something on Amazon. Because historically I had never had anything on Amazon, not a super huge fan of the platform for a few reasons.
Not only had you not put anything on there, you talked about how much you hated it and how it didn't make sense. Well, so that's why when I saw that note, I was like, what? But the experimentation side felt very much like you.
Yeah, and I was looking for fun things to do this year, as we've talked about previously. I didn't do a ton of super energizing fun things last year. It was mostly maintenance levels, social media, soul sucking, blah. And I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to do something fun. What would be fun? Mm-hmm. And I have, in the past, the main thing that I don't or didn't like about Amazon was that you don't know who's buying the book. So if you put a book on there, you don't get the email address of the person. You cannot communicate with your readers, which drives me insane. It's painful. And so I was like, okay. So I just put off the Amazon thing. That said, one of the things that I've been trying to do for a year or two is get more awareness, make people who have never heard of me aware of information that I think can improve their business. And it's not easy. It seems like it's getting harder and harder. Social media is just a complete disaster area in terms of, the people who have elected to follow you don't actually see. 99% of the people who follow me on Twitter or are connected with me on LinkedIn don't see anything I post. Mm-hmm. They want you to place ads. So now, in one sense, you can imagine it's like, well, I'm at the lesser of two evils point. Do I start paying for advertising? And so I'm like, I'm not against it. It's not a way I want to spend my time, going through ad manager interfaces and just split testing. And it's like, I don't really want to do that. I'm sure it works, and I'm sure I could, make it break even at least, so that that's on the table. I wouldn't completely rule that out. Not really my style, but it's so I'm like, well, wait a second. What if I just had a book on Amazon that I was getting paid for, that was being shown next to related books? So instead of paying for an ad to advertise something elsewhere. Mm-hmm. I don't even know if you can advertise something that's not on Amazon, come to think of it. But yeah, you probably can't.
I don't know that you can.
What a racket. Think about that. They're making money on both ends. They're making 75, you pay them for the ad so that you can sell a book that they make more off of than you.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So there's a lot to dislike about that. But what if I get paid to advertise on Amazon by having a placement, if you want to call it that, or a listing there that I get paid for instead of paying Amazon to put it there? So then I was like, all right, But I really want to know who's reading it. I really want to be able to communicate with the readers, have them be able to ask follow-up questions. And so I did something similar to what you did in the Authority Code. You have not a lot, it's I think an appropriate number of links to your workbook so that people can sort of go and get more material, beneficial material from the book. And of course, then you can interact with them. So I was looking for ideas on how to do that. And I came across a guy, I think his name is Nick Stevenson. It's confusing because Neil Stevenson is like a super famous author. But so I think this guy, Nick Stevenson, and he had like this approach to using Amazon as a funnel to your mailing list. I was like, oh, that's kind of what I want. I wasn't thinking of it as a funnel, but yes, I would like to know who has the book. So the approach is similar to yours, but it's got an extra step that I found interesting. And so far, we're about 10 days into this experiment. So far, it's working, which is this. In the book that I posted on Amazon, it's called Learn Your Lines. It's kind of a sales and negotiation book for solopreneurs or small firms, anybody in a service business, really. It's like what to say when your clients put you on the spot. You don't know what to say. He's like fumbling and like, ooh, I don't know. Yeah, okay, I'll lower my price. Or this, okay, I actually do have an hourly rate for some people. And, so you don't, you don't crumble on the spot. You don't fold. So that's what that book is. It's short. I think the print book's 82 pages or something. It's so short that there's not enough room on the spine to put the title. It's pretty thin.
Gotcha.
So this sort of idea, this Nick Stevenson idea, which so far has been working for me, is to have two books available on Amazon. One of them is free. The digital version is free. And inside of that, in the beginning and at the end, you have a promo page for another book. And the other book is paid, but readers of this book can get it for free by using it, with a coupon that only they know about. So it's the same as the workbook concept where, it's like, oh yeah, I do want that. And they can click on it because the ebook is clickable. You can click on it and it goes to my website and you can get the other book with a coupon.
Now the other book is on your website, not on Amazon?
It is not on Amazon yet, but it will be. So it's still with the...
And are you going to link them? So it's like book 1 and book 2?
In Amazon, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because Alistair McDermott's been talking about some of his experimentation with that.
Oh, cool.
And there's the idea of linking them is really attractive from what's the word? When you look at the way that Amazon treats the books and how much visibility it gives them.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I like Alistair's stuff. I'll have to check that out. I wasn't aware of that. So, right. It's not there yet. It's still with the layout guy. Because one message that meta message here I want to get out is that there's like no plan. It was all impulse. Like, what would be the fun thing to do next? Oh, I'm going to try this, like put something for free on Amazon, put a Kindle version of a book for free on Amazon. It's like, yeah, I'm just going to do that. I didn't like you with the Genius Zone challenge. You're just like, I'm just going to do it. I'm not going to research the market. I'm not going to do, yeah.
Sometimes you just need to do that.
Right. And no matter what happens, I'm going to learn something because I do, in my future, it seems inevitable that I'm going to have stuff on Amazon. So I was like, well, what? I was just curious. I wanted to learn more about it, kind of like, call it a deal with the devil if you want, but it's almost surely the number one search engine for books on planet Earth. So I write books. If there's 100 times more, I mean, there are probably literally 1 million times more people on Amazon every day than on my website. Literally 1 million, maybe more. Mm-hmm. So, okay, that's kind of mass market, but it's good at recommending things that are related, Netflix style. Like if you liked this, you might like that. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, okay, worst case scenario, I'll lose whatever revenue I was getting from selling this on my website. So I'll cannibalize the JonathanStark.com sales of this book, Learn Your Lines. Okay. Mm-hmm. Wasn't that, I mean, it's been around for a while. Everybody on my list knows about it. They've probably bought it if they were going to. So it's no big deal. No big loss. But the thing that I wanted to emphasize is that I sort of had some tactics that were strung together, and there was an objective, which is to make more people that have never heard of me aware of what's available. So it's like, this might work. It seems like it's in the right direction. I'm just going to wander off into the woods going west, and eventually I'll probably end up in California. We'll see. So
before you go further, though, I just want to point something out. I'm sure you've noticed this, but I don't know if the listeners have, is that what's really interesting about this move is that you changed your viewpoint about something, or you left it open, right? Instead of Amazon is the devil, don't do Amazon. Oh, I'm going to try Amazon. And it's that willingness to test our assumptions. We have to do that in order to experiment. I just love that you said, you know what, I'm going to try it.
The time was never right before. The time just wasn't right before. But now I'm like, I'm like, to be perfectly frank, my mailing list has kind of reached an equilibrium in terms of a ceiling. It sort of stays around the same number all the time. And I'm like, all right, I have to do something different. Like what got me here is not going to get me to the next level. So I'm trying other things, and I don't feel morally superior to Amazon. I don't feel like I don't feel like they're evil. I'm a huge Amazon customer. We literally have boxes coming to the house every single day. So, but as an author, I just didn't like the deal that seemed like what was on offer until I came across this idea of this Nick Stephenson idea of using a couple of books essentially like ads to funnel people onto your mailing list, or to get people who, give people a way to easily raise their hand to get on your mailing list. Mm-hmm. So there's, the cons are that you're not going to make any money unless you're Atomic Habits. You're not making money off these books.
No.
Like even the paperback, obviously I'm not giving that away for free. You can't. So, that's got a price on it. Some people have bought that, but, quite a few people over, I think it's approaching 2,000 at this point, have downloaded the free one in a week. And I don't really have a way to know whether or not those are people from my list or new people, but I will tell you this. When you upload, this, but for the dear listener, when you upload the files, it takes a little bit of time for them to kind of process and get approved. It takes like 48 hours, I think, and it took 48 hours in my case. And the listing goes live, and then I did this sort of hack where the minimum that Amazon will let you charge for an ebook is 99 cents. You can't put it on there for free. But if you go if you make it for free on Smashwords and Apple and Kobo and Barnes & Noble and so forth, and then you email their customer service, they'll price match. So you can get it on there for free. Mm-hmm. But, that was like an email to Amazon customer service. I was like, I'm never going to hear back about that. So
how long did it take them to get back to you?
Yeah. So here's what happened. So I send the email and forget about it because I figured it was going to take a week. Mm-hmm. And I got a Moonclerk notification that somebody had downloaded the free version of the other book, Pigeonhole Yourself. And I'm like, oh man, somebody found like the secret link to, and then I went on Amazon. It turns out I went and looked and was like, yeah, they got the free copy. How'd they do that? I went and looked. Customer service had already approved it. And 13 minutes after it became free, someone had downloaded the book and read enough of it to go buy the other one or for free.
That is so not what you hear with Amazon's customer service when it comes to books.
Right. But
Love that.
But I was instantly like, experiment worked. Like, it's still really too early to say, but I was like, wow. 13 minutes after this thing becoming free, new subscriber. Mm-hmm. Zero cost to me. Zero. Mm-hmm. And that's continued. I mean, I've gotten more mailing list subscribers through the download of the second book. How do I put this? It's something like on my list right now, there were something like in the last year, something like 10 people had bought that second book and ended up on my mailing list. And then within less than 24 hours, there were like 20 more people.
Yep.
So that's like more than double all of last year. And it's free instead of $29. So of course, but I mean, that's like 20 people in a day.
Well, it's on a big platform. And then the other question I have for you is around the ranking, because the last time I looked at it, you were ranked number 1 in at least 2 categories. And what happens when you do that is Amazon starts to show your book to more people.
Right.
So how long did it take you from, this first sale to having it hit number 1?
It was, by the time I checked it, it was number 1 in 3 categories.
Okay. And this was these are the free categories for those books, right?
Yeah. Right. And so something funny happened. Of course, I don't know exactly what's going on behind the scenes, but so this was before I even announced it to my list. I told I texted my family, and I texted you and a couple of people, and I was like, hey, it's a fun thing, it's just something to talk about. Like, hey, this is an older book, but I did update it and had a designer do a new cover and lay out the interior. So it's pretty nice, actually. And the print copy, I was like, wow, this is way better than years ago when I got galleys done for Hourly Billing Is Nuts. That was not great, but these are solid. I like it. Mm-hmm. And so my dad was all excited. It's like, oh, he's on Amazon. So it's cool. So anyway, so there had been some activity, a tiny bit of activity. It's something like, I actually took screenshots of everything because I kind of want to do a retrospective after things kind of level out, because it doesn't feel like every single day it's like something different going on with this thing. Yeah.
It's like a live thing.
Yeah. It feels like, I mean, I've never surfed, but it feels like surf. It feels like this wave. There's this energy that comes up that you're riding instead of like trying to push a rock up a hill. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to you kind of I don't know, set something into motion and then you're like, whoa, like trying to hold on. It's like you whack the horse and like you're holding on for dear life. Not that it's that dramatic, but it does, from an energy standpoint, it's 10 out of 10. It's just so much fun. So much fun.
Well, there's an organic nature to that, and you can't control it. It's like the opposite. You just hang on and see where it's going to take you. And then, maybe I don't know if the word steer applies in surfing, but that's kind of how I'm thinking of it. You guide it a little bit,
right?
Once you can.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's one day, I think it was, what was the exact date? I think it was, well, it does say on the Amazon listing, it was published on the 19th. So it's been 11 days, almost 2 weeks. And it felt like around a week, it was number 1 in 3 categories, although the categories would keep changing. It's so weird. Their category thing is so weird. It's not the categories that I listed it under. It's like it's almost like on the fly, they create all these subcategories so they can say everything's number 1 in something. It's so weird.
Well, nobody understands their algorithm.
I'm sure that's true. I mean, some people probably know more about it, but anyway, it's pretty opaque from where I'm sitting. But it did go down to like number 2 in all the 3 categories that they show it in. And I was like, oh, I guess the spike is over. Now it's just going to like descend into normal, what you'd expect. But then I was like, but then I sent it to the list, and a whole bunch of people downloaded it, and a whole bunch of people reviewed it. So it was something like 10 or 20 people reviewed it in the around the end of that week, going into the next week. So maybe like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 days in. And then it popped back up.
That's a well-known strategy too. It's why a lot of authors let their books go out the first time for a few days, where they're going to have a paid book. They put it out for a few days for free, and then you get your troops lined up to give the reviews. But this was much more organic. You weren't like massaging that process to have it happen.
Yeah, I didn't like plan it way ahead and get people ramped up or anything. But my email list is very warm. So it was like pretty good chance that it's a very evergreen book. Like anybody that deals with clients is going to benefit from reading this book. Like I promise you'll get at least one tip, even if you're great at doing negotiations and sales. So then it popped back up to number one, but this time it wasn't in the free categories. It was like, it was also like more, it's hard to tell, but it seems like based on the books that it was near, it seemed like they were more legitimate or popular categories, where like at first it would be like my book, and then next to it would be like a free Kindle Unlimited thing, like in Spanish or something. And I'm like, what grouping is this? Like this is marketing in Spanish. And like, I guess that was released around the same time, but it was just, like it was not a lot of other books. So like, it would be number one in some category. And if you click on the category, there's a bunch of books that were not, it wasn't Mark Manson. It wasn't Seth Godin. It wasn't Atomic Habits. It was like, and then it went down to number two in a bunch of categories, I think more legitimate or more popular categories. And then the reviews started coming up, and then it went back to number one in a couple of categories. But now when you look at those categories, there are more books in there that you're like, oh, I've heard of that. I've heard of that. I've heard of that. So I'm like, oh, that's pretty interesting. That's pretty cool. And I'll stop there.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what's so interesting, because it's a lot of this is dovetailing with my experience, except it didn't do because the free was temporary. Mm-hmm. It didn't do the free categories when I did mine. So I saw the other ones right away. But what you're showing is that organically you can take it up to those books, which is not the purpose, though, of why you did this. It's a happy byproduct.
It just makes me, it speaks to the awareness thing. Like if it's coming up in a list with books that are bestsellers, then probably people are going to see it. More people are going to see it. And if the positioning of it is clear enough that they're like, oh, I immediately get why that might be valuable. And by the way, it's free. So like if you look at the paid one, it's like in the top 100 of business pricing, which is a great category. But like business negotiation, which I would say is what this book is actually about. It's not really about pricing. It's about negotiating, I suppose. But
and selling.
Yeah, primarily it is negotiation, and it's like, the print one is like, the categories are business management. Like that's a huge category. Business negotiating, a huge category. Guarantee the first one is the Chris Voss book. If I click on it, yeah, it is. The top two spots are Never Split the Difference. Then the next two spots are, Getting to Yes, and then another version of Never Split the Difference. It's like another one in Spanish. There's like half the top 100 is never split the difference.
And that's the thing that nobody seems to understand until you put a book on Amazon the first time, which is every single version of the book you do counts as something, and it takes away from the numbers. Like if you had just a print or just a Kindle or electronic version, you're going to get more numbers than if you have the audiobook, you have the paperback, you have a hardcover, you have the Kindle. So yeah, I mean, that's why there's such a game to this. But the argument is still normally made that the more versions you have, the more people will snap those up. There are people who won't read a book who will listen to one. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And vice versa.
Right. So, it speaks back to that thing of like, it's an ad. So if you look at the top 100 books on negotiation, and Never Split the Difference is on there at least 6 times in different formats and languages, but the color scheme is so obvious. You can see that even in other languages, it's like, oh, I guess I better read that one. It's an excellent ad. If you don't, it's not, ad's the wrong word, but it's kind of like, and it also has 48,000 reviews, 5-star.
Yeah. And what happens is, the more frequently those things get shown, the more people buy them, and then the more reviews happen. I mean, it's, and there's a statistic I read, something about like the difference between the top 2 to 3 in a category versus the top 10, like the revenue drops off the cliff after the second or third one.
Right.
Such a huge difference. It's like a giant ski slope, very, very steep.
Yeah. Right. So this is intended to be It's not intended to be mass market. This is a niche book for a very specific audience about a very specific thing. And it can be delightfully short because of that. Just like straight, go, cut to the chase, get right to the meat of the matter. No fluff, no inspirational anything. It's like, here are the tactics that you hear the literal things to say. It's a script of things to say when clients ask you any one of these 30 really common questions. Will it be done by Friday? Will it be done by Black Friday? What's your hourly rate? Can we get a discount? There's like 9 different kinds of discount requests that I've seen over the years, and like exactly what to say depending on which one comes up. So it's super duper tactical, and it's for pretty much solopreneurs in service businesses or small firms. I guess a salesperson in a bigger firm could use this stuff, but it's not supposed to be mass market. It's supposed to it's just a test. It's like, well, there's a lot of eyeballs over here that are attached to human beings that read books. So, right. So it's like,
I'm going to try it.
Right. So like, why not put it in front of the eyeballs? Bring the book to the eyeballs instead of trying to bring the eyeballs to the book. It's the same philosophy that led to me playing guitar on the street in the financial district, if you can call it that, of Providence, where it was like, I got so frustrated trying to get people to come out of the suburbs to go to a show in the city that I was like, well, there's like thousands of people right here on the corner at noon. Why don't I just play here? Mm-hmm. And not be all precious about like, oh, you need to like, I need to bring everybody to my environment and comfort zone. I'm going to go out of my environment and comfort zone and play on the street, which is not the greatest from an acoustic standpoint, is a terrible, terrible thing, is a terrible place for a musician, really. But it's that same thing. And then I totally doubled down on that, and it was effective. Like, I started producing shows in parks. For one summer, I got a bunch of different musicians together, and we started putting on shows in a park where people hung out anyway. Mm-hmm. They're sitting there eating their lunch on the grass, staring at a statue. And so we set up in front of the statue and would do like 2 or 3 people. It was like a lunchtime concert series, I think I called it. And I probably got more people to come to that than any gig I didn't get anyone to come to it. They were already there. So this is the same concept. The people who read books are already there. So, okay, so hold my nose and put one up there. And just every day I'm going through and screenshotting all the pages. And so I can go back and look and say like, okay, what were the categories? Do I see any pattern? What did it have any effect? I'm measuring, right? Like a mad scientist in the lab. I'm like taking measurements, and then I'm going to like see what I see. And not only is it fun, but it's really not that much work. Like, I paid a dude, the guy that did the interior of the book, and he was like, oh, I could do the cover too. I was like, you can? He's like, yeah, I do those. I was like, great, go ahead. Let me see what you got. I was like, oh, cool. I like it. I don't know. It wasn't $1,000 for the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then I just uploaded it. And it was like super easy.
Well, so there's a couple things going on here that I'm hearing. Like, one is, I'm going to call what you're doing with Amazon like platform sharing. Mm-hmm. And you're going to someone else, in this case, the mega voice in the industry, but you're going to somewhere else, somebody else's platform. And if I compare it to your, singing and playing on the street corner, if somebody sounds good busking in a bad environment, they're going to sound great when they have all the right equipment and the acoustics. So it's kind of like, if they like your book on Amazon and they get the book, they read it, they really like it, then they're really going to love coming to your platform, right? Mm. Your place where they get the Jonathan Stark, or insert listener's name here, where they're going to get that experience. The other thing, do you know how many words there are in this book?
I think, I want to say 10,000.
Love that.
Does that sound right? It's a 2-hour read.
Yeah. So 10 to 15 maybe?
Around there, yeah. Tops.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, everyone who's thought about writing a book usually goes out and researches how many pages do I need to have a book? And, for certain kinds of novels, the sweet spot is like 80,000, 80 to 100. It could be higher. For our kinds of big idea books, it's usually around 50, 60, 10,000. That's you bucked a norm, which I love, because guess what? A lot of those books that we all buy, when we buy them, we secretly, or sometimes not so secretly, in the Amazon reviews say, you know what? This could have been a really long blog post.
Yes.
This could have been a magazine article. Like, it didn't need to be a book.
If somebody said that about one of my books, it would be like a knife in my heart. I despise that. And by the way, it's exactly 10,997 words.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So the moral of this story for people is, like, don't tie yourself to some, industry or publishing expert's definition of what it takes to be a book. I mean, it depends on what you want to do with the book. And for this, you had an objective, or I shouldn't say had, you have an objective, and this met the objective. This didn't need to be 30,000 or 50,000 pages.
Right. Yeah, I think it's better that it isn't. And here's another thing that happened that was unexpected. I guess in retrospect, I could have predicted this, but it took me by surprise. Where to everyone, almost everyone on planet Earth, other than the maybe 1,000 or 2 people that have purchased this already, because it's not really highly promoted on my website, and practically nobody goes to my website in the grand scheme of things. To everybody else, it's a new book, a brand new book. It's a launch. It's like, hey, there's a new book in the world. And so guess what happened? People started asking me to come on their podcasts, some big ones too. Like, oh, we need to have you on to talk about the new book. I'm like, all right.
You're like, what?
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Right. And then I was like, oh, I could go back to every show I've ever been on, which is like 100 shows, maybe more, and be like, I've got a new book on Amazon, and I'd love to come on and talk about it. It's about this. I think your audience would. I've already been on the show. I know their audience is going to benefit from it. If my general stuff, if my more specific, like hourly billing is nuts stuff was of value, then negotiation is definitely going to be. So yeah. So it's like a new thing, and I've talked about this. I'm sure we've talked about it on the show. I've talked about it before, especially in Email 365, where people are like, or podcast, right? They're like, oh, well, I don't want to launch a podcast until I have an audience to announce it to on my mailing list or social media or something. And I'm like, no, the launch is the thing that builds the list. And it's news. It is news to people. And it shouldn't be shocking, but it's funny how opposite it feels when you're the one launching the thing. So you got this thing, you wrote this book, you've created this course, you've got this idea for a podcast, or you've recorded like 5 episodes, and you want to announce it somewhere, but you feel like you have nowhere to announce it because there's no one in the audience, right? You like don't want to walk on stage to an empty room, but if you or you don't want to stand on an empty street corner, but if you do go and stand on the empty street corner and start singing, you're going to attract people. It's like novel. People are attracted to new things. So it seems counterintuitive. It's almost like a paradox. It's like, I don't want to say build it and people will come, but if you do something new and it's remarkable, the word spreads and people appear. It's wild. It's like you give a gift to the universe and the universe responds.
Okay, so that all felt like a surprise. I get that. And I agree with your strategy of going back to people. But there is one little nuance that is interesting, which is now you're on Amazon. And the interesting thing about having your book on Amazon, if I'm a podcast host deciding whether to have you on, and in this case, let's say I don't know you, right? Mm-hmm. I'm going to go and look at your book on Amazon. I want to see, like, what's it about? How many reviews do they have? What do the reviews say? Not like I'm going to read them all, but it's like a quick glance, like how many reviews? Mm-hmm. And I love to see like who the blurbs are from. Like it's a way when you haven't really heard of someone to quickly vet them.
Yeah.
And so, I just think it's going to be, it'll be slightly different. I think it'll be easier to get on with someone that who hadn't heard of you?
It would
you
work for
pitching?
me. Like if I was, right. So like if, we get all of these blind pitches, if I entertained them, and that is one of the things I would do. I would like click through and I would see, because you can't, I mean, obviously reviews can be gamed. People do it, but I don't know, like you can kind of get a sense and be like,
Yeah.
okay, it is a quick way. It's street cred or a credibility indicator.
It's authority. I mean, you can argue that, oh, it's not real, or, there's all kinds of arguments you can make against it. But the fact is people use it. The same reason they don't do this anymore. They would go to Twitter and say, well, how many followers do you have? Right. And now nobody cares.
Yeah.
Nobody cares
Subscribers on
about Twitter.
YouTube, stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. They're looking for, that sign, that signal, that shortcut that you're okay, right? That somebody is going to have heard of you because they want to bring new listeners to their podcast. And they also want something that's interesting without having to do so much work to vet you or your book or your stuff. I mean, we get some, we've talked about this, we get some really bad pitches on this podcast. And I've started getting a few on my other one. I won't say they were bad, but they're just not as rich and interesting as they could be. And part of that is because they don't have a quick way for us to credential them.
Yeah. It's a great shorthand. It's a heuristic or shortcut. It's like, oh, New York Times bestselling author of 3 books, Annie Duke or Seth Godin or whatever. Mm-hmm. And for someone that you haven't heard of, that is a really quick sort of institution you can trust, because it's tougher to game than like going to someone's website and them having like 5 stars all over it. It's like, well, that's your website. You could write anything you want there, right? Like it. Mm-hmm. But that reminds me. So I noticed that there was this interesting feedback loop, and I want to mention something about blurbs too, where I found myself, I'm like, oh man, like the reviews were so like, thank you for everyone who reviewed it, but like so glowing, but also so specific. And
oh, I love specific reviews.
Yeah. And they were like helping me, I'm inside the bottle. I can't read my own label. I've been too close to the material. Even though I wrote it a long time ago, I reread and I added a chapter and I went back through the whole thing. That was probably the most work I did, come to think of it, which only took me maybe 2 hours because it's not that long, maybe 3. But so then all of these reviews came in, and specific and very positive. And I was like, oh man, these would look great on the sales page, right? So then what was before a pretty lackluster sales page for the book started.
Sales page on Amazon or on your site?
On my site, right. Okay. So because what happened, okay, bookmark the question about linking to Amazon. So that's a conversation separately. So I was like, oh, this would look amazing on the sales page. So then I'm taking these 5-star reviews, putting them in there and updating the sales page because I'm like, for the reason, one of the reasons is the reason that you just outlined, is I want to give people a one-stop shop, like podcast hosts or whatever, for this to be like a shrine to the book. This is the place that I can control and collect things from all over the place and put them here and, make free chapters available or do a video, or like, this is the shrine to the book. Like if I was going to have a website called learnyourlines.com and it was just about the book, and maybe I have a companion podcast that goes with it or whatever, and then a workshop, and it's the beginning of that. It's the one page on my site where I would collect all of the marketing material around the book, so I don't lose it, because it's scattered all over the internet. Not all over the internet, but it's in a lot of places. It's like in LinkedIn, it's in Twitter, it's in Amazon, it's in Smashwords, it's in people have reviewed it in Barnes and Noble and Apple, and it's like, okay, where do I grab all that stuff and put it in one place? And it's like, okay, so speaking of the links, okay, this took me by surprise. It is surprisingly hard to send people a link to something on Amazon, because my audience is global and Amazon doesn't automatically redirect people to the appropriate place.
Country. Yeah.
Right. So when I sent the link to the listing in my head, like bad American, here's the link to the book. And I sent it out to people that are all over the world. I got 20 emails like, oh, it's not available in my region. And I'm like, yeah, in my head, I'm like, yeah, it is. And so I look and they've got screenshots of like, they ended up at the US website, and Amazon unhelpfully just says it's not available.
Yeah.
And I'm like, ugh. So then people were like, oh, you can use these Genius links and you can use this and you can use that. And that'll, so I went through a sort of process there. And then I was like, okay, I need to just share the hub link, the link to the page on my site where I can explain all of this stuff. Because I'm emailing back and forth with all these people like, oh, I'm sorry, what country are you in? Because they don't tell you what country they're in. They're like, oh, sorry, I'm in Brazil, or I'm in Canada or India. And I'm like, okay, use this link, use this link, use this link. And then someone told me about this Genius link, which figures out the redirect. I don't know why Amazon doesn't do this on their own, but okay. And then I was like, okay, never mind all that. I'm going to put it all in one place. So then I've got one link to share, and then all of the information about where to go, depending on where you are, is in one place, which was like a nice advantage for me. But then I started to see like, oh, this is becoming like a shrine for this, or a central hub for this, for all things Learn Your Lines. And then it was like, oh, this could be its own website. So
which we don't recommend, or at least I shouldn't say I wouldn't, but Book Central is how I thought of it, and it's, you have that for each specific book ultimately, right? Yeah.
So that becomes a place for me to collect everything that I don't want to lose or forget or whatever. Testimonials, reviews, comments, errata. There have been, even after 2 people went over it with a fine-tooth comb and Grammarly, there still was a typo, at least one. It wasn't misspelled.
Yeah.
It was like do instead of so. And the sentence still kind of made sense, but it changed the meaning of the sentence. It's like, oh,
I know. And then you have to reformat the book if the new word has a different, if it changes the pagination.
Fortunately, it won't, but it was like,
yay.
Still. Oh, that's another thing I don't like about it is I suppose I could get the source files from the guy that laid it out, but I don't have them. So every time I need to do a silly typo and re-upload it, I can't. So I need to do something about that, but that's outside of my comfort zone.
Yeah, that's kind of classic. Because most of us are not laying it out ourselves.
Right, but it's got to be in some kind of file that is editable. It's not like
right. You may have to make, I don't mean you specifically, but the listener may have to make their own arrangements with the person they're doing with. Some won't share the source files for obvious reasons.
Yeah. But blurbs, you mentioned blurbs. I didn't spend 2 seconds getting a blurb. None. Zero. Yeah. But guess what's going to happen? I'm going to end up with some
stuff.
I'm going to end up with them. There's going to be.
No, you will, because of the way you've done it. You get them after the fact.
Right. So this speaks to my sort of campfire marketing methodology, which I don't think I've talked about very much publicly, but I have a 2-day workshop where I talk about it pretty much exclusively. I'm sure I've mentioned before, it's like, if you take a magnifying glass and focus the rays of the sun on a log or a tree, nothing is going to happen. You're going to get some smoke at best. But if you focus that same energy with that same magnifying glass on some dryer lint, that thing's going to catch on fire immediately. And if you put some leaves on it and then some tiny, tiny kindling and then bigger kindling and then bigger kindling and then sticks and then branches and then logs, pretty quickly you can have a giant fire. But you have to do it in these sort of expanding, it's like I'm making like concentric expanding circles with my hand. It's like if you do these little iterations to get the flame a little bigger, a little bigger, a little bigger, before you know it, you can pour bigger pieces of fuel onto it. And I know you went through a lot of effort to get killer blurbs for your book, which is also smart, but I'm lazy. So I was like, I didn't even think of it. I didn't even think about it. because it's not
Well,
about.
because you haven't thought of these as classic books before. You've thought of them as things on your website that people buy as digital products.
Yeah, it's a place to download a PDF.
Yeah. Yeah. And in a way, that's the beauty of it, is that you're taking something that you saw one way and you're repurposing it to use in a different way. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the essence of certain kinds of experimentation.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, what would happen if I put this over here? Or what would I need to do to prepare it to, I wanted it to be, I didn't want people to like go through the trouble of even downloading the free one and be like, this is full of typos or grammatical mistakes. The layout's kind of crap and it's tough to read. It doesn't look like a real book, air quotes, because there are, so many digital versions now. So I wanted it to be, I wanted to put a suit on it, make it presentable.
Well, there's all kinds of marketing studies that show it's why when you have a small retail shop, you move things around because
100%.
People see them differently. That thing that didn't sell when it was over there, all of a sudden, everybody that walks in wants it.
When Erica managed the knitting store, she was like, every single time she rearranged the store, and she did it a lot because she has a background in retail. Yeah,
she's a professional,
right? So she's just like, you got to to the owner, you got to rearrange the stuff. Like it just no one's going in this corner. They might buy this if it's not in this corner, and sure enough, you rearrange it, and it's like, Meanwhile, the lady walked past the thing 100 times over the past 3 years, but never saw it or never saw it in a particular light.
Exactly. It's kind of like taking all of your assets as a business owner, and a lot of these assets are virtual, right? And looking at them and going, I wonder what else I could do with this. Could I put it here? Could I turn this into a workshop? Could I turn this into a book? Could I turn this into, a guest blog post? I mean, it's all of those things. Mm-hmm. I love it.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think if there's anything, was there anything else that really took me by surprise? One thing, a few people asked me about this because I think I mentioned on a previous TBO episode, probably the first of the year, that we must have talked about this on the show. I don't actually remember it though, because I can't tell when the mic was on and when the mic was off.
I know.
The recording was on or off.
Sometimes those green room conversations go long.
Yeah, but I have an idea for a new planet in my solar system that is much more mainstream. And
you didn't talk about that on the show.
Okay, so someone knew about it. So I don't know. They thought they heard about it on the show.
Okay, well, maybe you did, and I don't remember.
Yeah, who knows? It's tough to tell. Anyway, that's true. I do have that idea, and it's sort of like new planets in the solar system, where at a certain point I'm repeating myself with the planets that I already have, and without getting any better. Like if somebody asks me, like, what's really so bad with hourly billing? I'm never going to beat my best answer. Like I've already answered that as best as I can. Mm-hmm. So it becomes like, well, where's the new how do I satisfy new intellectual curiosity? And it's going into a level of stuff that's previously been off limits, just self-imposed off limits that have come up in coaching. There are several things that come up in coaching where I'm like, I don't know about that. Like there probably 2 or 3 really common types of questions that come up in a coaching arrangement that I'm just like, I don't do that, but they're common and it would be useful if I did do it. So I can see clearly what the areas for exploration are. So it's very obvious to me what they would be. Mm-hmm. And they're all verging on, they're somewhere between traditional business and like self-help. You can imagine with coaching, right? Because mm-hmm. people are dealing with all kinds of things.
Yeah, it's borderline self-help to begin with, usually.
Yeah, so that kind of a thing, So thinking that, I'm like, well, how would I get myself qualified to really write about something like that? And so that's one thought. And the other thought is that kind of a book is definitely going to be on Amazon. I'm not going to sell that just exclusively on my own site. That is the kind of thing that is closer to the mainstream middle of the market. The right place for it to be, or at least one right place for it to be, would be in the air quotes airport bookstore, but the equivalent online, of course, is Amazon. So I had said that somewhere and people heard it, something along those lines, and then they thought Learn Your Lines was that. And I was like, oh, no. learn your lines is the weather balloon. It's like I'm gonna see what it's like over here on this corner, see what's going on, see how it works, get some kind of familiarity with the platform, step on all the landmines with a lower stakes kind of thing before jumping into something that'd be a more serious undertaking where there's going to be a lot more time invested in doing the research, the writing, and then, because this is not something that I have 10,000 blog posts on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, so really, I mean, to start to put a bow on this, really what you're talking about is you have a bigger picture thing that you haven't figured out exactly yet. You just know that's your direction. And so this was a semi-planned experiment, semi-planned in that you have an objective. You weren't sure exactly how it was going to work and you just dropped it, right? Mm-hmm. Which is exactly what an experiment is, right? Right. So what do you think, aside from sort of the tactical learnings we talked about, what's your big takeaway from this whole experience?
A classic one is that it was scarier than it in advance. It was scary's overstating it, but I had more trepidation about it than I needed to. It's way less of a big deal than I thought.
I love that you just said scary. I know, seriously, I do, because there's always this thing that goes on when you're a soloist and you put stuff out there, and you're right, it feels way scarier than it actually is. And now you're sitting back with some experience under your belt going, yeah, man, this is good. What was I worried about?
Right. Yeah. It was a combination. It was like fear of the unknown a little bit, but it was all like, if I had examined it for a second, and I suppose subconsciously I did, because I eventually pulled the trigger and put something on Amazon, and so far I'm actually very happy with it. Because I'm not intending to make any money directly from it. I think my attitude would probably be different if I was trying to if this was my main revenue stream or something, I'd be in a very different mindset. But if I'm viewing it as an ad I get paid to run, then it's like, well, what's the big deal? I just need to make sure it's a good ad. So then the things that I would have been afraid of, there was one that I did articulate to people about putting anything on Amazon was like, I like it better when I've kind of onboarded people into my world through my mailing list and then they buy one of my books, because the worldview is a little bit skewed and kooky. And I don't know if a mainstreamer just came across like Hourly Billing is Nuts on Amazon cold, then I could imagine them being like, this book stinks, 1 star. It's terrible for these reasons. Not that I would read that and care, but it would be a bad ad for my stuff if a book with my name on it had like 2.5 stars on Amazon. Like that would be the opposite of what you would want. So, and I had said that either publicly or privately, but I've definitely said I'm afraid people aren't going to get it, and then they're going to trash it in the ratings, and then it's just going to look, and then it's going to be the opposite of what we were talking about before, where podcast host goes to research me and I've got a book with 2.5 stars on Amazon.
Right.
I don't want that.
Well, that's where the fear comes from, because when you're doing it on your own site, nobody sees it. Yeah. I mean, nobody sees the results. Like they see whatever you put up there, but you're not being ranked to everything else that's out there.
Yeah, being judged publicly.
Yeah, and especially for a niche book, because, niche books by definition are designed for a very slim group of people. Yeah. And it can be very high performing within that niche and still look like crap on Amazon.
Yeah, that's right. So it's kind of the question is like, am I too niche for Amazon is really the question that was in my mind. Like if I was going to encapsulate all of the fears that I had, it was like, I think I'm too niche for Amazon. And yeah, this book is not. This book is definitely not. But Hourly Billing is Nuts. It might be.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I don't have an answer for this, but it's interesting when you think about it, because big idea books, sort of by definition, pull people in to think about an idea. So you don't really have to be part of their worldview ahead of time. Like a Dan Pink book,
right,
as an example, you don't have to be aligned with his thinking on a thing in order to be drawn into it and read the book. So I think sometimes we think we're more niche than we are. But I'd still rather that, because then we're going to write something really focused as our first book, as our first piece. And I think that's helpful because it moves your point of view along. It moves your audience with you. And if you've got this intellectual property, this point of view that is going to take you up the hill in terms of a broader audience, then, you start niche and you work it through, you build your chops on those things. So yeah, there isn't anything about this process where I heard any like warning signs.
No,
None.
It's been fine. Right?
It's been better than fine.
It's better than fine. It's fun. I'm getting the data that I was hoping for. I'm getting some of the results that I was hoping for. So the objective was pretty clear. This is an ad that I get paid to run and help people in the process, giving away a free copy of something that is perhaps my most immediately quick to apply book. It's just like instantly helpful. So that's cool. Mm-hmm. It's the most tactical book I've written, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So it seemed like the perfect one. And it's just been really energizing, which was the theme from the beginning of the year. It's like, make stuff and put it. It's not enough to just make stuff. Like, I think that's what I said. Like, I want to make more stuff, but that includes putting it out there. So to me, this feels like, in fact, when I talk about it, it's like I've got a new book. It didn't feel like a book before. It was like a PDF I sold on my website. This feels like a book. There's a physical book on my desk now. It's like, okay, this is a book.
Yeah.
So
it's a big difference. And the other thing is that it also, you love to learn new things and translate them into something that you can make. So, I mean, this is right up your alley. Genius Zone, perhaps?
Yes, it's super. Yeah, 100%. I've been, last year, maybe I worked 5 hours a week. I've been working like 10 hours a day, air quotes work. Yeah, not 10, but like I've been working more in a day than I would work in a week last year because I can't stop because it's so fun. Mm-hmm. Right. So it's just super fun. I can't call it work. It's not fair to call it work, but it's maybe not fair to not call it work, but it's work related for sure. But it's just like, it's the best. It's just so much fun.
Welcome to Amazon.
Yeah. Come on in. The water's warm. Just don't try and make any money. Yeah. Okay.
Did we miss anything?
I'm sure we did, but people can, you know how to find us. Email's the best. All of our links are in the show notes, so you can click over to wherever. And my social media links are on there, but email me.
Yeah, if you want Jonathan, email him.
Yeah,
that's the best way.
Right. But yeah, any follow-up questions, happy to share everything I learned. I've been talking about this quite a bit inside of Ditcherville if people want to go there. But yeah, it's been super fun. I'm already looking forward to getting that second one up on Amazon instead of selling it directly the way I have been. Mm-hmm. So it's...
yeah, you've got a plan. And now you can link the books too, which will help you with visibility. Mm-hmm. Cool.
Love it. All right. Well, thanks for indulging me in my brain dump of the strategy and tactics behind, or lack of strategy and tactics behind, Learn Your Lines launch on Amazon.
Well, we had questions. Inquiring minds wanted to know.
All right. Okay, folks. Well, that's it for this week. I'm Jonathan Stark.
And I'm Rochelle Moulton.
And we hope you join us again next time on The Business of Authority. Bye.
Bye-bye.